Good evening, Mr. Scott.
Good evening, Mr. Brent.
Say we talk about some murder again tonight.
I'm totally down with talking about some murder. Welcome to Strange Embers. This is a very interesting case file that we've got that we've been studying on this week.
So this one is about, for anybody that heard the little promo reel, this one's about Robert Hansen, the butcher baker.
Shortly known as Bob the Baker.
So we're going to get through some facts about him, some early life, just kind of go through some of that, and then we'll get up to the murdery parts after that, if that's good with you.
Oh, I'm down with it, man. I love facts first. If we might have like a possible timeline or something that we could go by just to help the viewers out.
Yep.
Maybe that would help,
We'll see if we can post something in the show notes also. Robert Hansen, he was born Robert Christian Bose Hansen, February the 15th of 1939. He was born to the parents Christian and Edna Hansen. He had a not so happy relationship with his father as he was growing up. He was a very strict father on him. His father owned a bakery himself, and he had Robert working in the bakery long hours all the time, all that he could be there. He had no kind of time for friends, no kind of time to do anything else. His dad was just pushing him constantly.
I not to cut you off, but I also doing this research, I found that there was one person who said that his grandfather actually worked at the Hansen Bakery and implemented in the comment, and it was, I can't remember what form it was from or whatever, or how accurate it is. But he said that Mr. Hansen was very demanding and very strict on all of his employees, but especially Robert.
So when you said Mr. Hansen, you're talking about his father or the grandfather?
No, the father.
Gotcha. So also with being at the bakery all the time, Robert Hansen also had severe acne when he was growing up that scarred his face up some, and he had a bad stutter. So from the research I did, this stutter that he had and the acne said that he was bullied a lot through school for both of these. And from what I've read, it seems like it was bullied mostly from the girls about these. So I think, that might come into play later on, possibly.
Maybe like some type of like a rejection revenge. Or a rejection revenge or something along those lines. Yeah, I could see that.
Very quite possibly. He had no close friends growing up. Like I said, he didn't really have time to do anything, but with the bullying and doing all that, he had no kind of close friends. Skipping ahead, I'm going to skip through some of this stuff. We're going to kind of go through this as quick as possible to get to the other. So he graduated in 1957. After he graduated, he enlisted to go into the Army Reserves. While he was in the Army Reserves, he became a skilled marksman. And for anybody that don't know what that is he really honed his shooting skills. When he was not doing his reserve duties with the Army, and he was an MP in the Army as well, when he wasn't doing his reserve duties with the Army, he still worked at his father's bakery. Every moment that he could be there, his father had him there, unless he was going off to drill. From there, he also worked as a volunteer drill sergeant for a local police academy. And in 1960 is when he met and married his first wife. Met and married her all in the same year. So, as he was a volunteer drill sergeant with the local police academy. He was also a volunteer firefighter.
Ooh,
And
see,
that
I
comes
didn't
in,
know he was a volunteer firefighter.
yes, he was a volunteer firefighter as well. And that comes into play because in 1960, the same year he married his first wife, December the 7th, him and a 16-year-old that he talked into going to help him set fire to the school bus barn. So this was also while he committed arson and burnt down the school bus barn, is the same point in time that he was a volunteer firefighter as well.
He had the inside
Um,
scoop.
that's right. I mean, it's kind of one of those things. I mean, he had a radio. He knew exactly what they're, when the call's going to go out and everything else. He could be gone,
That's true. Yeah, that's very valid. Very valid.
but he was also caught. He was caught. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison for arson, but he only served 20 months. He was paroled out after 20 months, even though while he was there, they had comments that he had an infantile personality. But that didn't, I mean, that's not really something you can, I wouldn't see that being something to hold somebody, but I mean, you think it would come into, that would be something to come into play for, to get a parole, right? I
Well,
mean, if you,
you would think because um, if the viewers don't really know what an infantile personality is, it's basically it's a personality disorder that describes someone with having an obsession with getting back at someone or multiple someones who he felt did him wrong.
so I mean, setting, committing arson, burning the school bus barn down when he had so many problems in school. I mean, it fits right in with it, correct?
Yeah, yeah, it would 100%.
So while he was doing serving his time during that 20-month sentence, his first wife divorced him during that time frame.
And I mean, they were only married for a couple months, maybe half a year.
Yeah, before he got arrested.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Yep. Um. So then we're gonna move ahead to 1963. That's when he remarried. After he remarried, he had two children. Also, um, I have his wife's name down here after I found it finally. He was married to Darla Marie Henrichsen Hansen. I think I
And
said that name.
let me just go ahead and throw this disclaimer out there. There has been a ton of digging from Brent and myself just to find the name of his second wife. We cannot find the name of his first wife. So if anybody has any information on the first wife, we would actually love to know who his first wife was. But we have a feeling that she might have went into some type of program with the government or something to kind of keep her name out of the limelight.
Yeah, and I couldn't even find his kids'
No,
names.
his kids' names are not there either.
Yeah, I couldn't find them. I did find some comments at the end of this. I'm going to go through a little bit of additional information that I found, and some of it has to do with his daughter that I found.
Oh, okay, cool.
Um, so keep moving. 1967. That's when he moved his family to Anchorage, Alaska.
Yep.
And when he got to Alaska, he was a well liked person in there, and he was an avid hunter, and that's kind of where he set his name at in Alaska to become part of the community up there, was because of his hunting.
Yep. His neighbors, from what I've read, the neighbors actually adored him and his family because any animals that he would harvest that he did not want to keep the meat, he would actually distribute them throughout the community and give it to folks.
Right. And doing the kind of donation stuff that'll come into play later with his bakery also. Um so when he moved to Anchorage, Alaska, he had already been to prison for arson. The time after he got out of prison, was remarried, had two kids. He got arrested multiple times between then and moving to Anchorage just for petty thefts and all. He would get arrested here and there for stealing just insignificant stuff.
More so like misdemeanor type stuff.
From what I couldn't find any kind of like prison time from any of those. So I imagine it was just fines, slaps on the wrist, just it's going to be smaller things.
Right. Yeah.
So
And
when
it kind
he,
of comes into play in the future of this podcast. Maybe how he got away with not doing a lot of prison time for certain crimes that he committed. Well, we will kind of touch base on that. Just try to remind me on that, Brent.
okay. Um, so then he goes to moves his family up to Anchorage. So they're living up there now. We're gonna go ahead 2 more years from there. We're at 1969 now, and he is 30 years old at this point. And now at this point in time, he has had multiple animals entered into the Pope and Young's trophy hunting world record books. He had
And go ahead.
4 animals total.
Yep.
1969, 1970, and 1971 are the 3 years that he actually entered animals into the record books.
And I did exponential amount of data observing to actually get the animals that he did enter into the Pope and Young. And for the listeners, the Pope and Young is actually back then, I don't know what it is now, but it was bow hunting only. It was a bow hunting record book. The 4 animals that he entered were 2 barren ground caribou and 2 Dall sheep. He was actually top of the Pope and Young on all 4 of those. He also held the world record for the largest ram killed with a bow, a recurve bow. Now, all these were taken with recurve bow.
One was a crossbow.
One was a crossbow. Which one was a crossbow? Because I didn't see that.
The first record, one of the Dall sheep.
Okay, one of the Dall sheep was a crossbow. See, I didn't see that. Then I retract. I know the ram. I know the second Dall sheep, and then at least one of the caribou was with a recurve.
Okay.
The ram held a world record. Let's see. I think they said during the 70s and the early 80s, nobody beat his record.
Oh, no kidding.
Yep. At least that's at least for the ram.
So I went through Pope and Young. I went through there. I tried to find the records of where he was actually in there, which I mean, we know he was, but I was just going to see if I could find out how long he stayed in there before they actually took his name out, because he is not recognized in the Pope and Young anymore.
No, he's not.
And
there's
from some of
actually
the things that I've go ahead.
There's actually other record holding books that he was in, but they completely did away with him and do not want their name to be recognized for having him in their record book.
No kidding. So
I don't know what book it is, though.
One thing I heard was, I don't know if it's the Pope and Young or not, but one of the record books to begin with, when he was, it might have been before he was convicted, maybe just when he was arrested, I don't know, but they refused at first to even, there was a lot of people wanted them to take him out, to not recognize him, and they wouldn't to begin with. They said his record is his record, but finally they caved,
That was the Pope and Young.
It was them?
Yep.
And then so they wound up taking it back out. So we're going to skip ahead a little bit further. So now we went from 1969, 70, 71 was the record. So now we're going to 1977. This is when Hansen was arrested for theft. This time he was sentenced to prison for 5 years for stealing a chainsaw. I mean, 5 years for a chainsaw, but I don't know if, there's got to be more to that for if you're getting 5 years in prison for a chainsaw. I mean, it's more than likely the rest of the stuff is caught up with him now. They're just, it's not necessarily just it's a chainsaw, but probably everything's added up. All the small things have added up to this now. Well, so go ahead.
I'll let you finish and then we'll go back. See if
so while while he was in prison, this time, the prison psychologist or psychiatrist diagnosed him with bipolar affective disorder. And he also prescribed him lithium to take for his manic mood swings. But this was never enforced. They prescribed it to him, but they could not enforce him to have to take this, so he never even took that.
He also had a schizophrenic disorder as well.
Okay. So up to 1981.
Can we backtrack just a second?
Absolutely.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I from what I've seen, this is the date that I picked up, and I could be 100% wrong on it. December of 71, he was arrested twice before the
Mhm.
chainsaw.
That's correct. I'm going to come back to those.
Okay, all right, cool.
Yep. So right now I'm just kind of covering the more his life leading up to it and some of the basic stuff that happened.
Okay,
And
yeah,
we're
yeah,
gonna
yeah,
we're
yeah, yeah,
gonna
yeah.
come back to that because I found it interesting that maybe the chainsaw thing has to do with those also.
Yeah,
But
I can see that. Yeah.
yeah. So 1981, this is the year when Hansen reported a burglary.
Burglary. Cut.
Yep. 1981, Hansen reported a burglary to his home, claiming that his hunting trophies were stolen. So when we say hunting trophies, more than likely that's either going to be horns from the animal or that's going to be mounts, something like that. We're not talking about a trophy like I won a I won a ball game trophy, not one of those.
A wild game trophy.
Correct. On this, he filed an insurance claim that these were taken, and on that claim, he got $13,000 from the insurance company. And this $13,000 is
That's a
what he used.
lot of trophies to get $13,000.
That's absolutely a lot. The money that he got off of this is the money that he used to open a bakery. The bakery was on the corner of Ninth and Ingra.
And we are also going to have pictures of everything we're talking about that we can find pictures of. It'll be on our Instagram. So if y'all are curious about what some of his trophies look like, or you know anything along those lines, feel free to go over there and check that out.
Yep. And we're going to put all the links of the socials that we have in the show notes.
Yep.
So he's had the bakery opened up, and with this bakery that he opened, it was a very successful bakery, and with that came along everybody pretty much forgot about this other stuff. So, I mean, he's already been to prison 2 times. He's had multiple convictions on multiple charges, and he has this bakery going on. This is where I saw him, like you said, he would give food away from the
Right.
animals that he had harvested. So now, local police, anybody that came by, like this, local police officers, firemen, stuff like that. Oh, he'd feed them, come by, here's snacks, here's coffee, whatever. Everybody knew him, and he was very, very popular.
I feel
Not
like you
only
say snacks because you don't want to offend a police officer, but what Brent really means is donuts and coffee.
donuts and coffee. I think it was more than donuts, though. First, in the research that I did, I found out that later on, these trophies that were taken, that he got the $13,000 to open that, these were found in his backyard, and that pretty much that had went away. Nothing ever happened to about it. But as we keep going, he did actually get charged for insurance fraud to have to do with that. And
I
this
was about to
is
say.
that. Yep, that is part of the when everything started coming down. He did get charged for that as well.
Gotcha.
So we got January of 1982. This is when Hansen bought the Piper Super Cub, and this was the plane that he used to transport his victims out to a remote cabin on the Kinnick River. I hope I'm saying that correctly. So this is the one that actually transported them. So I'm kind of curious also because this is in 1982 is when he bought this plane. That's at the end of everything. So before that, was there another plane that he had that we didn't know about, or I mean, how was he taking people up there to begin with before this?
See,
Because
I've
this,
got a conspiracy behind it, but I don't want to give any spoilers for the future of this podcast. But I think we can get to that. My conspiracy theory on it.
okay, you want to go to it now?
I'll. You know what? Yeah, we can.
Okay.
So my thought process is, and we'll get to this later on. There was a specific case where Hansen was accused of doing something, and he had multiple of his friends that relayed an alibi to the police. Said, Hansen's definitely not the guy that you're looking for. Y'all have got it all twisted. Something's not right here. That's not who you're looking for. My conspiracy is what if one of those two, or if not both of them, were also involved in this kind of trafficking situation? Because if I'm not, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure both of those guys were also avid hunters as well.
They were, but I mean, at this point in time, a lot of people up there were hunters because even when everything started falling apart, when an investigation started about bodies being found, that was two off-duty police officers that found the first body to start the investigation,
While
and
they
they
were
were
hunting.
off-duty hunting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I read that. Or did
So I
he own
mean,
a boat? Because you could get to that valley by boat as well.
you could unless it was deep into the winter time, because if it was that, then it's going to be
It's gonna be
froze.
froze over. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it kind of goes both ways, but it's
Or did he store the bodies and then fly them and dispose of them up there?
I don't think they did that because some
I
of these
don't.
bodies,
I'm just throwing out options here.
the I don't know, he got them up there some kind of way though, because if this was the only plane he had, it's towards the end of this. Either that or he did a lot of killing really quick, which that's a good possibility too. Some of the timelines as far as how long these the bodies had been out there, some of the timelines were majority of my scene was probably about 6 months or so. So he might have just went on like,
A huge kill spree.
yeah, just an all out rant right then.
Yeah.
And when I get to some parts about his wife and all, it could make sense when, for information I found about a second wife, that could make sense that that's when everything just started. He might have started with this, just kind of slow here and there, but then just really ramped up.
Well, it's like a lot of um, serial killers and things. They start with really small things, and they just continue to build their profile up and up and up and up until they don't feel satisfaction in the little things that they were doing,
Right.
and then ultimately they go to killing.
Got to get that dopamine hit.
Right.
So I mean, it's just like anything else. I mean, if you drink coffee every day, the caffeine quits working.
That's why you got to go to a double shot of espresso, like I'm drinking right now.
Oh, so we're gonna, as I go, I apologize up front because I'm probably gonna screw some of these names up, but I will try my best. So we're gonna go to September the 12th, 1982. This is when the two Anchorage police officers they were in Ekutna. That's spelled Eklutna.
I looked up the pronunciation. It's Eklutna.
Eklutna?
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you. So they were in Eklutna hunting along the Kinnick River. So this is a spot that is about 24 miles north of Anchorage. John Daly and Audie Holloway were the two that were hunting. So they had been out hunting and they're headed back towards their camp now. And they're coming along the side of this river. As they're walking down through there, they see a boot sticking up out of the sand, which is it's not odd, but it's not, it's a boot just sticking up.
And we're talking
Oh,
dead of winter.
correct. So they go over there to kind of see what's the deal with this boot, and when they go to find out more, that's when they find a bone joint right there with the boot. And that's when obviously they're two off-duty police officers. They knew, let's leave it alone. Time to back up. They made notes on their maps of where they found this, what's going on, so on and so forth. From there, they went back to their camp, got their gear, made their way back to town, reported what they saw, and now here comes everybody out. We're going to start this investigation now because we have a body. So when they come out, Sergeant Rolly Port was assigned to the investigation. He was said to be one of the top investigators and extremely thorough. He was also known to spend hours going through every little scene. It didn't matter how small it was before he would even disturb a body. He would meticulously look through everything. So when he got there and started going through this, he came through everything. He finally got to the part of coming up to the body, just taking pics. I mean, obviously it's a body out in the middle of nowhere. There's not a whole lot of stuff, but he's still going through everything, taking pictures from all angles. He's getting everything he can get. Before he even touches where the body is, he pulls out a large screen, and now he starts sifting the sand around the body, working his way up to the body. And while he's doing this is where his meticulous behavior on the way he went through a crime scene paid off, because he found one single 223 bullet casing. And that one casing is the key thing that's going to, find out what happened to her. So after taking the body back to Anchorage and the autopsy was completed, they found that the body was a female. She had been dead for approximately 6 months. Her cause of death was 3 gunshot wounds from 223 bullets. Ace bandages were found in the remains that led them to believe that she was blindfolded. I mean, I'm going to take it by the way that reads. It must have been with the skull.
Had to have
I
been.
mean,
Yeah.
had to been if they're making that kind of assumption about it.
Well, they said
So
it was in the remains. It didn't specify if it was like, because during the decomposition of a body, the body will actually absorb material that's around it,
that's true.
and it'll break down things. Like, so ace bandage is actually designed to deteriorate. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious if it started to just eat into the bones, maybe, or just soak in, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. That's a very good possibility of where it was at. So it took them roughly a little over 2 weeks to identify the body that they found. They found out that this was the body of 24-year-old Sherry Morrow. She worked as a dancer at the Wild Cherry Bar, and she was last seen November the 17th of 1981. She told some of her friends the last time she was seen that she was going to meet a man to pose for some pictures for $300. That particular part right there.
That's weird.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's weird, but I mean, to me, it's one of those kind of like Ilmos. However, whether it be somebody trying to kill somebody, kidnap them, whatever, it's one of those. What's the age old tale? I'm a model hunter. It kind of fits in with a lot of different cases here and there, but
Yeah, but
as I kept as
that's
I kept
just
researching, the part that you're going to find interesting about that is I found a survivor's tale that I'm going to get to at the end of this that sounds a lot like this.
really.
Yeah, and I'm going to read you exactly the survivor's tale. I'll read it word for word of what all she had to say, and it's very interesting.
But see, that MO doesn't in from what I've researched, doesn't kind of strike the same MO that Hansen had though.
What do you hear? Some of the stuff I've read, I've found out.
All right.
It'll kind of play in. It's
Okay.
very
Okay. I
interesting.
trust you. I trust you.
But just like everybody says, I mean, it's one of those. You have some people sometimes that's just searching for that 15 minutes of fame. They might make up stories or whatever. I mean, do even with that, do we know if the story's true or false? No, but it's their story sounds really freaking good, like it would line up.
Either she's a really good storyteller or legitimate.
Yep,
Yeah, I get you.
one or the other. Anchorage police suspected that Sherry Morrow's murder wasn't the only one. Over the prior 2 years, they had an increase in missing persons that were reported. And most of all these that were reported were strippers and prostitutes. And a lot of the cases, strippers and prostitutes are the type of persons that live lifestyles to kind of bounce around, this, that, and other. So even if they go missing, sometimes they might have went to another city. They might have went
It's
elsewhere looking for work, and
nothing out of the
nothing's ever
ordinary.
correct. And if they don't have any family looking for them, and they go missing for 6 months to a year, and they show up, then when they do it again, I mean, nobody really thinks too much about it. At this time, they didn't really think. They thought they might have had something going on at this point in time, the police, but they didn't want, if there was a killer, they didn't want to throw the killer off and make him run. They didn't want
Mm-hmm.
him to kind of suspect anything. So the police went, and everything that they said to anybody. So, like the Anchorage Daily News were talking to the police, and the police quoted to them, "We don't believe we have a mass murderer out there. Some psycho knocking off girls." That was a quote from the Anchorage police detective Maxine Farrell that went out on the Anchorage Daily News, because they didn't want, if they had something going on, they didn't want to spook the killer.
Yeah, because when you do that,
So
the perpetrator's kind of going to go lay low for a little while before he starts doing it again, if he was intelligent enough to do so.
right, some will, some won't. Some leave their calling cards because they want to be.
It's like a thrill, I
Some
guess
of
you would say.
right, it's that other dopamine hit. When the state police was assigned to work with the Anchorage police, after comparing their files, it was found there were links with two other unsolved cases. The first one, construction workers were digging near Eklutna Road and found partial remains of a woman in a shallow grave. Animals took away the majority of the remains, and she was never identified, and they nicknamed her Eklutna Annie. Later the same year, another body was found in a grave pit close by. The body was found to be Joanne Messna. She was a topless dancer. Her body was also badly decomposed, and little to no evidence could be found, just as with Eklutna Annie. And that's where the case went cold.
Mm-hmm.
Until June 13th, 1983.
Ooh, I like this part. This part's the fun part.
So now we're getting into, this is when everything started to unravel.
So on June 13th, 1983, Hansen had been stalking a specific prostitute, and her name was Cindy Paulson. And he offered Cindy Paulson $200 to perform oral sex for him. Brent, I'll let you take this from here, and then I wanna get a little bit back into it.
Okay. So I'm just going to pick up on the way I wrote these notes. So from right there, June 13th, 1983, a trucker was passing through town when he saw a disheveled woman running, waving her arms and yelling at him. She had handcuffs hanging from her wrist and no shoes on. She said a man was after her and to please help her. So he let her in the truck, and she asked to be taken to Big Timber Motel. He took her to the motel. She went inside, handcuffs still hanging. and asked the desk clerk at the hotel to call her boyfriend or pimp, whichever one you want to call him. The truck driver left. She was there. He left her there. He left, went straight to the police, and reported the strange encounter with them. After he reports it, the police leave from right there. They head straight over to the Big Timber Motel, and there she is. Story just like he told. She's still there. Handcuffs hanging off of her, no shoes on. Officer Greg Baker was the one that went there. He removed the handcuffs off of her, and she told this story, which would be unbelievable to most people, but we'll find out that it was as she said. She had been approached on the street by a red-headed 40-ish-year-old man. He offered her $200 for oral sex. But while in the act, the man locked a handcuff on her wrist, pulled out a gun, and told her that if she will cooperate, he won't kill her. He drove her to his house in Moldson.
Moldine, right?
That was at Moldine.
I think so.
After he got to his home. Now we're talking about his home.
Muldoon. Sorry.
His
Muldoon.
actual house.
Where his wife and kids are.
So, well, they're not there at this point.
Well, no, but that's his.
Yeah,
That's their residence.
Yep. He took her there, took her to the basement, chains her up, brutally rapes her.
To add to Brent's, where she was chained, she was actually chained. We got a picture of it that's going to be on the Instagram as well. She was actually chained to a post in the basement
where she couldn't sit down. She couldn't. She just chained up. She even said at one point he even pulled out a hammer and raped her with a hammer as well. After he got tired, apparently this went on for hours, and after he got tired, he laid down on a couch beside her in the basement and took a nap. After he got up from his nap, he proceeded to he showed off his hunting trophies to her, and that's the mounts and horns and stuff like that, and just talking to her like he's trying to be her friend. He's showing off. He's showing off his hunting trophies to her. She knows his name. She knows who this guy is at this point. He showed her everything. At this point, he tells her he's going to take her to the plane and they're going to fly up to his cabin. And if she doesn't give any problems while they're there and does as he says, he'll let her go.
He also liked to tell his victims that they were just going to go to the cabin to, quote unquote, have fun.
I don't know who he's planning on the fun. I guess he's just referring to himself.
It's got to be fun for himself, but nobody else.
So she knew at this point he'd gave too much information. She knew if she goes anywhere, she's not going to live. Because she knows who he is. She's seen his face. She can identify him. She knows everything.
She knows his name, knows where he lives.
Literally where he lives.
Yep.
She's seen the inside of his house. She's seen his hunting trophies. She's seen everything.
Told her which airfield that he stored his plane at.
So they go there. He gets her out of the car. He puts her in the airplane. And he goes back to get supplies out of the car to put into the plane. When he does this, she jumps out of the plane and ran for everything she could run for to get away. And at this point, that's when we're going to go back to where we started this little part, and that's when she was running down the road waving her hands, and there happened to be a truck going through town right there where she was at.
Yep.
The reason she was barefoot is she knew she was in trouble. I mean, obviously she knew that, but she knew she was in trouble when she was going to that plane, that she was not going to live. If she leaves on that plane, she's not living. So she knew one way or the other, either I can die here trying, but I'm not going to just freely just go to my death like that. So while she was going there, she took the shoes off inside of his car for the sole purpose of two different reasons. I'm either going to get out of here and those shoes are going to be there to identify me, or I'm going to die somewhere and those shoes are going to be there to help identify me.
Yep.
One or the other. And that did come into play later on when they search his belongings, because the shoes were still in his car. So after hearing the story about all of this, the police drove her to the airport at this point. Now, do you remember, she just ran away from this airport. The police drove her back to this airport. And when they did, they're riding through there and they asked her, "Do you see anything that looks familiar?" She saw a blue and white Piper airplane, pointed at that and said, "That's the plane right there." So the police go over there, they get the tail number off of the plane. They check it with the flight tower, and the police were told from the flight tower that this plane belonged to Robert Hansen. He then took her to the hospital, dropped her off. Officer Baker and some other officers went straight to Hansen's house from this point. Hansen was mad about being confronted about this, and he told the police that he had nothing to do with this. It's just some prostitute, and she's making up stories so that she can get some of his money because he has a successful bakery and all.
He
And that they're
also
just
he
they're
told
just
the police from his statement, she was trying to cause trouble because I wouldn't pay her the extorted demands that she requested me to pay for oral sex.
and
That
then
was
he
his
made the
statement.
comment also with this. He had made this comment was, you can you can't rape a prostitute, can you?
Wow.
That was a quote that they put in there that he actually said.
But something else to keep in mind, and this is where it goes back to the other back in 71 and all that, whenever the petty theft started and the chainsaw theft and all that, the cops also noted down that Chris Hansen didn't appear to be any kind of way except to be a very humble and meek individual who always smiled and had a kind heart.
Yep. They all, I mean, as far as up there, everybody liked him. Everybody liked him.
Yep. And he also had an alibi for whenever this happened as well.
Well, we'll get to the alibi in a minute. So after he did that, they was, asking about where his wife and kids were. He told them that they were in Europe on vacation. So,
Oh, see, I didn't know that.
yep. So if that was true, I don't know if that's true or not, because from what I found is that her and the kids would go to, I'll get to it later, but I think they would go to Arkansas just about every summer. So
To visit family and such.
yes. So I don't know if it was, he just said they were in Europe, as a keeping up this family life kind of look,
Yeah.
or what, but that's what he told the police at that point in time. And then he gave them information about that he was with two of his friends, and they went to the friends, checked them out, and his alibi is checked out. So no charges were filed against him at this point because everything he said checks out. The thing about that is this girl that just came in with this story. I mean, I guess that comes back to what you just said also, is he said that she was mad because he wouldn't pay her. So I mean, I guess he had an alibi too of why she knew about the inside of his house. It's, he didn't deny that he had a prostitute. He just denied that he wasn't trying to kill her. He didn't
Correct.
do any of this other stuff.
Pretty much just playing it off as like, this woman's freaking crazy, dude. Like, I wanted this at this price, but she didn't want to, and that was it.
Right.
So, but that doesn't explain the handcuffs. That doesn't explain
No.
any of the bruising. That doesn't explain any of that. Why the heck is she barefooted to begin with?
Right.
I mean, you see what I'm saying? Like, why couldn't the detectives kind of put multiple things together here to
Well, I
say,
mean, it's not. I don't even think it's so much of they couldn't put things together. I mean, at the same time, you have, which you'll find out later when he actually does get arrested. They don't charge him with murder to begin with. They
no,
charge him with
yeah,
everything but murder because if they charge him, if they charge him with it, if they go too far with it too quick, you don't want to go there until you have
you don't get
that
anything out of it.
concrete. Yeah, because if you go there and now you don't have the proof and they walk, you can't charge them with it again.
Correct.
So,
It becomes a cold case, and that's it.
yep. All right. So now we're going to go to September the 2nd, 1983. This was 10 days before the anniversary of discovering Sherry Morrow. Another body, partially decomposed and in a shallow grave, was found near the Connect River. This was the body of 17-year-old Paula Golding.
Mm-hmm.
She was a topless dancer and a prostitute from Anchorage. She had been missing for 5 months and was also shot with a
223.
223 bullet. So the investigators were sure now that they have a serial killer, and they called the FBI in at this point. So the FBI Investigation Support Unit sent Special Agent John Douglas.
And this dude's pretty good.
He's the rock star. He's the one, as we go into other cases and all, he will come up again.
Yep.
He's big name. He's worked a lot of very, very big cases.
And he is very good at putting together profiles and things of that nature as well.
And that just blows my mind.
Yeah, how he does it, I don't know, man. Like, it's crazy.
It blows my mind because there's a lot of these cases I know that he's worked, but I mean, not even him, just these other profilers
Just
as
in
well.
general.
They create these profiles. So with him, like, let's just say this particular one with Robert Hansen. One like this, you go in there, and when they come in, they've already got a pretty good suspect, right? They're going to be, so soon as he comes in, the very first thing that happens is the Alaska troopers and the Anchorage Police Department. The very first thing they tell John Douglas is Robert Hansen is a key suspect. Here's our files. Here's where we're at. You're probably going to want to look into him. So if you have somebody that has that kind of information right out of the get go, when they start building these profiles, do you have all the profile information?
I've got. Let's see here.
We'll compare them in a minute and see what all we have, because when they build these profiles, like even with this one, when he builds this profile, I mean,
yeah, I mean, I've got it right here.
Spot on. All right, go ahead with it.
Now this might not be the full profile of him, but this is just the short of it, I do believe.
Okay.
The FBI profiler believed that this was a repeat offender who was an experienced hunter with very low self-esteem, with a possible history of rejection, compelled to keep souvenirs of his murders, such as jewelry or clothes. And somehow the FBI also had the notion that he may have a stutter and possibly some kind of resemblance on his face, as in markings.
So when you build a profile out like that, with this one, like I said, he comes in, they already give him a key suspect. So when you go to that, you're like, well, he knew who Robert Hansen is. He has this information already.
Yeah, we already know Robert Hansen has a stutter. We already know Robert Hansen has severe acne scars. Plus, on top of that, the girl that got away was Paula. Wasn't that her name?
Oh no, Paula was a body that was found. The one that got away, I honestly
Cindy
I can't remember.
Paulson. Cindy Paulson. Cindy
Yes.
Paulson also in her statement stated that he had a severe stutter and he did have scarring on his face.
Yes.
Something right here to go back to Paulson is kind of a backtrack here.
Yeah.
But Greg Baker, we talked about him earlier with the APD.
Yeah.
He was the investigation specialist, I guess you would say.
Okay.
He put in quotes, I had a feeling that Paulson was telling the truth. I was sure Hansen was involved. Because of that, I was sure he was lying to me. But I learned early in my years of law enforcement, if somebody will lie to you, that's the best thing in the world. One, they can't remember the lies. And two, lies are easy to prove false.
Yeah.
And then I got more quotes once we get further on from what Baker said as well.
All right. And we'll discuss some of this stuff more after we get through all of the all of the nitty gritty of the whole thing also. But the talking about the profiles, the even when we go back to other cases, there's other ones that will come up later on that these profilers, when they make them, they have came down on some of them to, we think he even drive that the killer would be driving this color, this make, this model car, and they would be spot on.
It's got to be some kind of psychiatry or psychology behind it.
There's got to be, but I mean, even on those, like there's one particular one that came down to the car like that. I mean, this guy, they said they figured his hair would be this color, that he wore glasses, he drove this kind of make, model, and color car, and it was spot on every bit. This was before
exactly
this guy was even a suspect. He wasn't even a suspect. He wasn't even on the radar.
I'm pretty sure I know what case you're talking about.
Yeah. So, a part of this profile also is whenever he built that, when you gave those, he also noted in this profile that the killer would also be a quote unquote saver. This means that he wants to keep stuff from them.
Right, like a souvenir.
Correct. That was part of his profile on this. So,
which it kind of does make sense, because with him being a hunter,
yes.
What's the one thing, being a renowned hunter, he had trophies.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that right there hits the freaking nail on the head, dude. I mean, it's just crazy.
When we put the pictures on Instagram also, I think I have a pretty good picture of his trophy room or basement trophy room or whatever. I think I have a good picture.
Yeah, is it the same? I think it's the same one that's in the short, right?
It might be. It is full.
Yeah, it's got the deer, the sheep, the ram.
Yep. Yep. There's a lot of them in there.
We also have a picture of, or I do, that I'll be sending to Brent, of the same exact basement where, with the post in the picture where he would tie his subjects up to, he has a picture of both of his children playing with a train track in the exact same basement.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I didn't even notice that in there. Douglas is on this case now.
Yep.
He needs to, the biggest thing he needs right now is he needs a hole in Hansen's alibi. Because that's the only thing he's got to go on right now.
And that's where the lies come into play.
Correct. So I had two different things in my research, which when you do the research on some of these things, you know how, you know the old game, you whisper something in one person's ear and it goes down the line.
Yeah, and then it's nothing like what it was to begin with.
So when I do the research on this, I'm gonna read what I have in my notes first, and I'm gonna tell you the other version I also found.
Okay.
But I think this one's gonna be the more true one.
Sure.
But so he needed to find a hole in Hansen's alibi, and he wanted to pursue him more. So he called in the two friends that were his alibi. He called them back in for questioning again. They're not under arrest. They just come in to be questioned. But at this point, this is when he put pressure on them. So he let them know, at this point in time, I think you're lying. This is just my words. This is not any kind of quotes or anything, but, I think you're lying. If this comes down to, I find out that you're lying and he is who he is, there's going to be charges brought on y'all as well to go along with this.
I mean, that's aiding and abetting for the most part.
Right. So I mean, he's putting pressure now. This is not just a friendly little, we're going to chit chat for a minute. He's putting pressure at this point. So whenever he does this is when the friends finally get to thinking about this and they crack. And they told them at this point in time that no, we lied. He was not with us. He called us. He needed an alibi. He called us. We set up an alibi. And then, not only that, they also come clean about the insurance fraud that he got the $13,000 from the insurance. The friends are the ones that told that if they'll go check, there is there are also the trophies are in his basement, that they were not stolen. So at this point, this is when State Police Sergeant Glenn Floth, I think I'm saying it right.
I think is it Floth or Floth?
I don't. It's one of those. If I'm saying it wrong, I do apologize. He went to Judge Victor Carlson with a 48-page affidavit, and he received 8 search warrants to be executed on Hansen and his property.
That includes plane, car, house, cabin, everything.
Yep.
Now, do they have Hansen locked up?
No.
Okay, so he's still working bakery. He's still doing his shenanigans and
he's
living
still doing his
best life.
shenanigans. So I'm gonna step out of the notes for a second. We're gonna talk about that.
Okay.
So the other version that I heard, I don't have my source on that one, but the other version that I heard is that the wife of one of the friends, that she voluntarily just called and said, "You need to talk to my husband again because he lied. He was not, Robert was not with him. He was not with Robert. He was asked to be, hey, if anybody asks, I was with you." And at this point in time, other things were happening. The community kind of knows what's going on. At this point in time, we have a serial killer and we're looking for what's going on. And so she's like, this alibi thing's it's not jiving with this.
It's too coincidental.
Yeah. So I'm not looking to go to prison, and here you go. If my husband wants to lie, that's on him, but I'm out.
Yep.
That's the other version I heard. Now, could that line up with this as well? Yes, because she could have been the one that went to Douglas or them and gave them, that bit of information. And that's when Douglas called the friends back in and put pressure on them then. That could have been the thing that triggered him to do that.
Yeah, it could just be, both of those are actually, she could have made either an anonymous call or said, "Hey, I'm such and such. This shit ain't cool. Boom, let's get it fixed."
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. In this particular series of events that I'd found right here on this one, I couldn't find anything to do with that wife having anything to do with any of this. So I don't know if that was, I don't know. I mean, they could both go together. That could very well be factual information to go along with it. So, moving forward, we have October the 27th of 1983. And this is, I know we've kind of went through some more, so I'm going to back up. The last date that I had was September the 2nd of 1983. That's when the next body was found, and that's when the FBI was called in. So we went from September the 2nd to October the 27th.
Three or four. That's 4 bodies, right?
Yes, that is 4 at this point.
You got Sherry, Joanna, Eklutna Annie, and Paula Golding.
Yes.
That's 4.
And you have the girl that ran away with no shoes and handcuffs.
Yep. And Cindy Paulson.
Yep. So we have 4 bodies and 1 alive.
That got away.
Yep. So at this point, they got the 8 search warrants. So investigators followed Hansen to work. And when they followed Hansen to work, the other groups of people went to go start executing search warrants. So they went to a group went to his home, a group went to the plane. They're going everywhere. At this point, Hansen he's still denying everything with them. They show up, they follow him to work, they go ahead and they're executing warrants. They tell him here's what's going on, so on and so forth. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing. They we're at the point while they're searching now. They're at the point they're fixing to call it a day. They've searched, they're not finding anything. But one of the officers then found a hidden space tucked away in the attic rafters.
Mm-hmm.
When he found this hidden space, this is when he found a Remington 5.52 rifle, a Thompson Contender 7mm single shot pistol, an aviation map with specific locations had X's on the map.
Now
Various
let's explain that. Had more than 4 specific locations marked X on that map.
correct. There was various pieces of jewelry, newspaper clippings, a Winchester 12 gauge, a driver's license, various ID cards. Some of these license and ID cards belonged to the women that were dead.
Mm-hmm.
And the most important piece that they found out of this was the 223 Mini 14 rifle.
Yep, the Ruger.
So, at this point, now we've taken Robert Hansen in.
Now,
At the police,
did
go ahead.
You might be getting to this, so stop me if I'm jumping ahead of you or not. Did you see what they did to the interrogation room before they put him in it?
I don't think so. Go ahead with that.
Okay, so the FBI agent, being a step ahead of everything, he said before we take him in. Now this is just my words, not quotes or anything, but essentially before we take him in, I want to prepare this investigation room to see how he's going to respond and how he acts, to see if there's anything off about his demeanor. So what they did is after they found that aviation map, that large aviation map in his attic,
right?
They had it. They found pictures at his house of him and his family, including his wife, both of his kids. They found the driver's license, blah, 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 all that. They put a pegboard or I guess you could say a cork board up, and they tacked all of that information on the pegboard or the cork board, put him in there, and let him sit for multiple hours before anybody even went in there. And from what they said is he didn't act surprised. He didn't act concerned. He was more intrigued and wanted to look at the map in further detail to see if it was the true map that they found at his house or not.
Oh, wow. No, I did not find any of that. That's interesting. So there was also another map found.
Yep.
Go ahead with that.
So that map was found in I'm pretty sure it was in the cabin. After they did the search warrant at the house and the plane and the car, found everything at the house, then they said, okay, well, we know this dude's got a cabin. They found somehow, I don't know, it didn't go into further detail on that, but they know where the cabin's at. They go to the cabin with the search warrant, and they found tucked behind the headboard of the bed another aeronautical aviation map that was way more in detail. It wasn't just a regular aviation map, but it was an aeronautical view of everything else. Which
it was a big map.
It was a huge map. And so, on that map, there was 17 X's. On the other map they found at his house, I think there was like 10 or something like that. It wasn't all 17. The one at the cabin had all 17 X's.
So that, I was fixing to ask you another question, but you just answered it with saying that also was, I was going to ask, how did they search all day and not find that behind a headboard, but I forgot about the cabin?
Yep.
So they hadn't been to the cabin yet.
Nope. And okay. I'm pretty sure that's the only thing they found at the cabin. I'm pretty certain that's the only thing they found at the cabin. I could be mistaken. It didn't specify if they found any souvenirs or anything of that nature at the cabin. But I know for a fact they found that behind the headboard in the cabin.
I doubt it. I mean, I doubt he would have any more souvenirs anywhere there.
I would feel like if it's in one stash.
Yeah. It seems like they would all be together. So
he didn't hide it good enough.
they so now they got him. They take him to the police station, and obviously he denies everything.
Yep.
So you've already talked about, what happened at the police station. At this point, this is when, I guess, after the hours they let him sit in there, they come in there and they start asking him questions. And he talked with them a little bit, apparently, because it said after a while. So I don't know, I didn't have any kind of quotes or anything about what if he said anything at that point in time. But after a little while, he got tired of it, requested an attorney, and just shut his mouth and didn't say nothing else at that point. Which, I mean, he should have known the way the system works. This is not his first rodeo being arrested.
So can I backtrack just a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
Going back to the Greg Baker, the APD agent.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever they were asking him after Cindy Paulson, this is all quotes from what he said. We went over to his residence. We went down, and there was a recreation room. I'm assuming his basement.
Mm-hmm.
There was a couch there. There was a bear rug on the floor. Everything was like Cindy Paulson said it would be. We didn't find any physical evidence, but I still thought Robert would probably be arrested. But then the investigator, not Greg Baker, but the other investigator, said that he believed Mr. Hansen and that the story would probably be more likely that Cindy had jumped the price on him and he refused to pay it.
So both of them it was the split.
Correct.
That's interesting.
And I guess that's because they didn't find any physical evidence. Plus he let them inside his house.
Yeah. I mean, he didn't put up any kind of fight. He didn't put up any kind of.
He didn't say, "Do you have a warrant?"
It said he was. Yeah. No, none of that. But it said he was aggravated about it and all. But he didn't. No, he invited them inside. After they had him there, he got his attorney. When he got his attorney there, that's when he was arrested at that point. And they charged him with assault, kidnapping, weapons offenses, theft, and insurance fraud.
Continue.
So now we're gonna move ahead. That was October the 27th. So now we're gonna move to November the 3rd, 1983. This is when an Anchorage grand jury came back with 4 indictments against him. First degree assault and kidnapping, 5 counts of misconduct and possession of a handgun, theft in the second degree, theft by deception, and insurance fraud. They were waiting on the ballistics test at this time to come back before they was going to charge him with murder. Because, like I said earlier, you don't want to jump the gun on it. No pun intended. He pled not guilty, and bond was set at $500,000 at this point. That was November the 3rd. November the 20th, 1983. This is when the ballistics came back in, and it was determined that the shell casing found at all the graves matched the firing pin, and the extractor markings were identical. This is when he was charged for murder at this point. And we're going to skip ahead now a few more months. We're going to go to February the 22nd, 1984. This is where we start getting some details of what happened from Hansen. Hansen and his attorney, Fred Dewey, they had a meeting with the DA. The DA means district attorney. And this is when he was offered a deal. They told him in exchange for a full confession, he would only be charged with the 4 cases that they knew of. And he would serve his time in federal prison rather than inside of a max security prison. And Hansen reluctantly agreed. So it was put in there that he was only going to be charged with the 4 cases because they knew they had those X's on the map.
Yep.
And you'll find out in a minute whenever I go to this next part. But they had the X's on the map, so they could have went and looked. But I don't guess they put any footwork on that part yet to go find out what those X's were, because I
You would
imagine
think that they did, though, because all
possibly.
4 of those X's were exactly where they found 4 bodies.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when they say exactly, you're talking about a map and you put an X on
Well,
there.
yeah,
So
I
if you
mean,
got a map that
within
right there and you put an X right there, I mean, when you find a body, then you're like, yes, dead on that X. But if you had an X on the map and you just go out there and look, I mean, God, what's that? You probably got a 10-mile, 5
that's
mile
true.
radius or
Yeah, that's
something.
true.
So, unless
Especially
you
from
have
an aeronautical map.
exactly, that's what I'm saying. It's not like we had a county map and you're
There's
blocked
no
down to,
latitude and longitude like you have nowadays
yeah.
on
So,
Google.
all right, so now we're going to go into right after he reluctantly agreed to the plea deal. At that point in time, everybody signed the papers to this plea deal. After everything was signed, this is when he began talking.
It gets good.
And this is when he said, this is coming from Robert Hansen himself. This, what all he had to say was a lot longer. I just picked out some of the stuff that I thought needed to be said. So Robert Hansen said, this is what happened. This is the way most of these interactions would go. This is the way that they transpired. I'd pull out the gun. I think the standard speech was, look, you're a professional. You you don't get excited. You know there's some risk in what you've been doing. If you do exactly what I tell you, you're not going to get hurt. You're just going to count this off as a bad experience and be a little more careful next time who you're going to proposition or who you go out with. Then, whenever he would get a victim, he would normally take them by plane to his cabin and he would brutally rape them and torture them. After he was done doing whatever he wanted to do with them, he would make sure to strip them butt naked, and then he would send them outside. Sometimes, not all of them, some of them would be blindfolded. And that's when he would set them free. And when he set them free, they probably think, I'm free. I just got to get away now. He's not doing anything. He let me go. So this
Set
is when
them
he would.
free in the wilderness.
Correct. But I mean, after everything they just went through, they could care less if they were in the wilderness. They're freaking running. So he would give them a little bit of time, let them take off running, give them just a little bit of time, and then he would, with the Ruger Mini 14 rifle and a hunting knife, this is when he would begin to track and hunt them. And this is another quote from Robert Hansen that he said about hunting them after they ran. He said, I quote, "It was like going after a trophy doll sheep or a grizzly bear." So, I mean,
Isn't that just that's just like, my goodness, dude.
yeah, like no, zero were given.
There's no remorse at all. It's just like this
No.
dude's like, okay, yeah, I'm hunting humans now.
Yeah. I mean, it was that was his thing. It was just after they're gone, then he has the thrill of the hunt now of instead of an animal just trying to run away, he has a
Something actually scared for its life.
well, I mean, an animal could be too, but it's what's the
Yeah, but when you're stalking an animal, I'd say about 75 to 80% of the time, if you're stalking properly, that animal's not going to know you're there.
no. And even if they do, I mean, you're not to them, it's just a jump over the thing. It's not like you're a threat they know of. So at the end of this interview where he tells all the details of how he would, carry this stuff out, at the end of the interview he was given a map and he identified 15 grave sites on this map. 12 of the grave sites that were on the map were unknown to the investigators. Since it would have taken a lot of time to locate these graves by the check marks that he put on the maps, they just took Hansen put him in a military helicopter, and they flew him out there.
As part of his deal, quote
Yes,
unquote.
part. Yep. So they fly him out there, and you know he's got to be at this point. They're flying him out there. He's going to revisit these graves where some of them he's put them in graves, some of them wasn't. But I mean, he has now. He's caught. I mean, there's no no ifs ands or buts about it. He's caught. So you mean if he made the quote that it was like hunting doll sheep or grizzly bear, that means at this point he has an audience that he's taking out there to show
He's
his
showing off.
trophies. Yeah. So I mean, he's just like just basking in it.
He's
He
living
is.
in the limelight at this moment in his life. This is what he's always dreamed of, is having some kind of
Validation.
validation.
Because I mean,
Exactly.
he's been in those record books. So I mean, this is part of his. I mean, when he was growing up, he didn't have the friends, he didn't have validation, he didn't have nothing back then like that. So when he went in those record books for the things he killed, that was his, that was his 15 minutes of fame. So now he has all these police, and he's there as taking him out there for him to go show.
Asking
He's
questions.
got the same exact feeling off of doing that than he did when he was putting stuff in those
Absolutely.
record
You
books.
already know he did. And on top of that, you got to think also, if it's like hunting a grizzly bear or a doll sheep, the ones that he killed, he's going to know exactly how it went down. He's going to know exactly where it took place. He's going to know every key detail of every single freaking human hunt he did.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So he takes him out there. They take him out there in the military helicopter. They flew him out to the Connect River. Then they went from there. They went east to Jim Creek. Then they flew west to. I'm gonna mess this word up, to Sustan. I think I can't remember. Then flying south from there to Horseshoe Lake and Figure Eight Lake. He would take them to the sites when they were there.
You're talking, not to interrupt.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about the Matanuska Susitna Valley.
That's hard to say.
The Matanuska Susitna Valley is where his cabin was, and there was also a couple bodies in that same valley next to his cabin.
Oh, they were right there by his cabin.
Well, I say that. I mean,
Well, yeah, close. In
within
vicinity.
radius.
Yeah. So I did not know that either. So he'd take them to the sites that he had marked. And when they were there, they would mark it with some orange tape, orange paint, or whatnot. They didn't, he wasn't there with them trying to excavate stuff and all. They were just marking these places that he would go show them exactly just right here. Hansen showed them the sites of 12 unknown women that they knew nothing about. So February the 18th, 1984, this is when Hansen pled guilty to the 4 counts of first-degree murder for the murder of Paula Golding, Joanne Messna, Sherry Morrow, and Eklutna Annie. February the 27th, 1984, 1 week prior, Superior Court Judge Ralph E. Moody, this is when he sentenced Hansen to 461 years plus life without the chance of parole. And he was sent at that point to Lewisburg Federal Penitentiary in Pennsylvania. By May of 1984, they had found 7 of the bodies that Hansen pointed out, and that was it. No other bodies were ever recovered after that. The 7 bodies that were recovered, April the 24th, Sue Luna was found at Connect River. Same day, April the 24th, Mala Larson in a parking area by the old Connect Bridge. April the 25th, Delynn Frey was found at Horseshoe Lake. April the 26th, Teresa Watson at Kanea Peninsula. I think I'm saying that right. Same day, April the 26th, Angela Federn was found at Figure 8 Lake. April the 29th, Tamora Pedersen was 1.5 miles from Old Connect Bridge. And May 9th, Lisa Futrell was found south of the Old Connect Bridge. So he buried a lot of them right there by that bridge, also. Very, very close by it. In 1988, they opened up a new correction center called Spring Creek Correction Center in Stewart. And this is when Hansen came back to Alaska, and he was one of the first inmates to be put into that correction center. In 1990 is when his second wife and his children, they left Alaska due to harassment. She didn't want to leave, but at this point she did. August the 21st of 2014, this is when Robert Hansen died at Alaska Regional Hospital in Anchorage, Alaska, of natural causes, of health issues. Because of his plea deal, he lived it up. He went to federal prison and just lived it up. I mean, I say lived it up. I mean, he's in prison, but
it wasn't a maximum security.
No, I mean, not only that. I mean, federal prison is, yeah, it's prison, but he had TV, he had radio, he had 3 meals a day, he had a bed to sleep in. I mean, he didn't come close to paying for his crimes. Anywhere close. At all. There were also some other people that were missing. Some other girls. June 7th. Was it June? No, I'm sorry. July the 7th, 1983.
To go back to the victim you found at Horseshoe Lake.
Yep.
Was that Horseshoe Harriet you're talking about?
That was. Wait, no. I'm sorry. That was not. That was at Horseshoe Lake. That was DeLynn Frey. No, these were the 7 bodies that were covered where he went and marked that they actually found. That was the ones that were off the marks. That was the girls they actually found.
Okay, all right. So you haven't got to the Horseshoe Harriet yet then?
No, not yet.
Okay. I got some interesting key details on that too.
Okay. Let's go. We're going to get to that one in a minute. I'm going to give these other names real quick, though, also. On July 7th, 1973, Megan Emmerich, she was 17 years old, went missing in Anchorage. In 1975, Mary Thiel, she was 23 years old. She disappeared from Stewart, Alaska. Both of those, they suspected Hansen as being a suspect to do with their disappearances, but nothing's ever came about it. But those are actually some other missing girls that they think he had something to do with.
Or was there a secondary?
Well, yeah, no. We're going to get to that one as well.
Okay.
June 28th, 1980, Roxanne Eastland. She was 24. She went missing in Anchorage. And in 1981, Andrea Altery, 22 years old, she went missing as well. All those I just said, I'm saying their names because they went missing, and they're suspected to be that Hansen probably had something to do with this, but they don't know. I mean, we'll probably never know. Now we're going to step back. One more time again. We're going to go back to March the 24th of 1972.
Brent, all this stepping back is it's put me in a Twilight Zone right now.
There's something on the wing. So back in 1972, there were This is before he was arrested for the arrested and went to prison for the chainsaw incident.
Right.
So before that,
I know where we're going with this.
he was arrested 2 other times before that even happened. One of the arrests that he was arrested for was for
Abducting and attempting to rape an unidentified housewife.
that's one,
The
and the
second
other,
was for actually pursuing and raping a prostitute.
and there's another one.
Oh, so there was 3.
Apparently, now, he only got charged. He only got arrested for 2 that I knew of.
Oh, okay. All right. But I didn't know about the third. I only got the
So,
ones he actually got charged for.
yep. So the other one was. If you want to go ahead and talk about those, I'll get these straight.
So for these two in particular cases, the cops handed him an option, I guess you would say a plea deal. But he wound up pleading no contest to assault with a deadly weapon in the former offense. The rape charge involving the prostitute was dropped due to that plea bargain. He wound up serving 5 years in prison for that. But after 6 months of that, he was placed on a work release program. And I think that's where Brent was going with the whole chainsaw thing. But he was released to a halfway house and then arrested again for the chainsaw and sentenced to another 5 years.
So the first one that went was Robin Patterson. She was interviewed by the police. He had this police officer had a tip from a state trooper, and the trooper said, I have an informant, and if you talk to her, she has information. Later, he found out that the informant that the trooper told him about was actually the trooper's daughter. She was a prostitute.
Boy.
She was a prostitute. Robin Patterson, she was 18, working the streets to pay for her heroin habit. She told Sergeant Gilmore that on the night of December the 19th, I don't have the year right here. I might run back into it, but I don't have the year. She was in the parking lot of a Nevada nightclub when she was kidnapped at gunpoint by a man who said he'd kill her if she didn't do what he wanted. She described him in detail, between 23 and 28 years old, probably 5'8" to 5'9", slender, wearing horn-rimmed glasses. After binding her hands with leather shoelaces, he drove her south on the Seward Highway, and that south of right there keeps coming up over and over. That's one of the places where one of the bodies were found as well.
Yep.
So along the way, he kept pulling off the road and telling her that he wanted to make love to her. He tried to kiss her, made her strip down so that she couldn't escape, and said he wanted to slash her bra with his knife. She kept telling him no, that she didn't want to do it in the car. He finally got to a motel deep into the Kenai Peninsula at Copper Landing, and that's another spot where a body was found. They tried having sex, but he couldn't finish. He expected her to fight just like all the other girls had, but she didn't. So on the way back to Anchorage, he just threatened to kill her if she ratted him out. Once he drove her back, and once he drove deep into the wilderness, she had talked him back. That's when the cops came in, and they had what was called an asshole book. This book had photos of all the perverts and predators that they've ran across over the years. So after she came back and went to the police, she was handed this book at the police department and told to scan it. She starts going through it one by one, and as she did, she flipped over and there was Robert Hansen. And she identified that this was the man that did this. And then that's when Gilmore learned that he had been arrested barely a month before on assault with a deadly weapon charge involving a real estate secretary. When he kidnapped Robin, he was out on his own awaiting trial for the November incident. It was said this man had no shame. Robin, meanwhile, was ready to speak her piece. Quote, you know, I may be doing something that some people don't think is totally acceptable, but it may not be, but that's not why I'm here. I'm here because that Robert Hansen guy is probably a premeditated, cold blooded killer who was killed before.
Hmm.
Robin snubbed out her cigarette before she started continuing. Quote, he said he killed before, and everything he said was absolutely true. Everything he said he was going to do to me came true. Everything he said he would do, he did. Every threat he made, I believed. And if he says he's killed people, I believe he's killed people. And if you've got a young girl who's been killed around the same time in that same area, then I believe it was Hansen who killed her. I believe he would have killed me too. End quote.
Mm.
And, you know, she's made this statement at this point in time. This was back, and this was 71, 72, something like that. And this is where some of the other bodies were found later. You know, they wasn't found then.
Right.
But, I mean, she could have very well have been one of them. Hansen denied his involvement with the death of Scylla Van Zetten. She went by Beth, but the similarities between her abduction and Robin's were worth noting. They were taken to the same area, their hands were bound, they were both stripped to prevent escape, both of their bras were slashed or threatened to be, and they were sexually assaulted. It was also worth noting that Beth's house was within a mile of the real estate secretary's apartment that he was being charged with. Um, and Hansen had cruised that area before. So
See,
I mean,
all this is brand new to me. Then I have never even. That must have been something that you just
it
pondered
is.
upon.
So whenever this came up, Robert Hansen was charged in Anchorage Superior Court with assault with a deadly weapon for the attempted abduction of the real estate secretary. He was charged with rape, kidnapping, and assault with a deadly weapon in the Robin Patterson case. On March the 24th, 1972, the Patterson case was dismissed in exchange for a no contest plea on the attempted abduction.
Okay, so I wonder if that was the unidentified housewife.
Maybe. Maybe because these are the ones I know about. And that probably was. That's going to be my
That would
guess,
make
is that
sense.
probably was. Hansen was ultimately convicted and sentenced to 5 years imprisonment. He was transferred to a halfway house on June 17th,
Yep.
1972. This is what you just
Yep.
talked about. Placed on work release, and then was paroled November the 1st, 1973.
Yep. So that had to be the unidentified that I couldn't find the name for her. That had to have been the robbing case there.
So just literally hours ago, I found this. This is on this was found on dps.alaska.gov just a few years ago. August the 20 no, August of 2021, after 37 years, a new DNA profile for Horseshoe Harriet was made.
Yep, I found this one too.
Yep. So after 37 years, they made a new DNA profile. A
From a
family
very
tree
close
was built.
from a very close relative.
Well, that was after they've built this profile, and this profile was ran, and it said that it might be Robin Pilecki. They searched into her and found out that she did live in Anchorage, Alaska, around the early 1980s.
Which would have been right in the prime time.
Yep, right there at the time of when all this happened. She would have been 19 years old at the time of her murder. But no report of a missing person was found for anywhere around that area for her. So she was never reported missing.
So my question is, was she a prostitute? And if she was, did her family just
Probably, I'm going to
unown
guess
her?
I don't know, possibly because something could have been going on. Because apparently she is from Arkansas. So whenever they found this and they found out she was from Arkansas, they contacted Arkansas State Police. The police found and contacted a very close relative of Pilecki's and got a DNA sample. And on September of 2021, it was confirmed that Horseshoe Harriet was in fact Robin Pilecki.
Yep.
So Horseshoe Harriet has a name. One other thing, so when I was doing this research, I found his second wife's name. That's what we was talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So
Darla.
here's some of the things I found out about Darla. During the time of all of this going on, so he was put in jail for the kidnapping and rape charges were dropped, and he had pled a no contest on the attempted kidnapping and firearm charge. Right?
Right. That was in 72, right?
72. This is before he went to jail for the chainsaw. While that happened, his wife, he's married.
Yep.
He was married before they came to Anchorage. During this entire thing, she stayed right by him. She
Knew
knew
he was doing it.
Yes, she knew all this happened. She thought that she could change him, that she could make him better. And they said that even though he was well respected and loved, now these things I found, I found that people has interviewed her before, the wife, the ex-wife. She has gave statements here and there, but she said home life wasn't good with him. He was, I mean, he
What
came
you could
from his,
expect.
right. So I mean, it was. She said he was very. I'm not gonna say. It didn't never say that he was physically abusive. It just said abusive. She also knew that he picked up prostitutes. She knew he did. She knew he'd stay out in the wee early morning hours and go pick up prostitutes. But she said she never once thought that he was killing them or any of that. That never crossed her mind. She said she knew about the prostitutes though.
Isn't that crazy? I've also got a statement from the ADA, the Alaska District Attorney, Frank Rothschild. He's the one that prosecuted Hansen's case in the 80s. He said that he thinks the prosecutor in 72 made a grave mistake by letting Hansen plead his charges down.
Yes.
Quote unquote, I think it was a grave mistake. I think if you'd found any reasonable jury, they would have found him guilty and he would have gotten 20 years in jail, and a lot of other women would still be alive if they would have done that.
Yes,
I think,
absolutely.
and this is what really gets me, and this is where I'm going to end my portion here. He said, I think he learned from those early cases, and the thing he learned is choose your victims.
Yeah.
Don't choose nice girls. Don't choose people who might be believed. Choose prostitutes. Choose go-go dancers. Choose your victim so you will maximize the likelihood that the case won't even be handled. You won't even have to deal with it. No one will believe it.
Yep. That's spot on.
No one will believe it. Isn't that? It's just like, wow, dude. And Hansen had him fooled for a while. He did.
Yeah, he did. He did. Well, the ex-wife of his, she, when she left after the divorce went through, then that's when the house and everything was hers. The divorce was put through. Everything was put into her name. That's when she was able to sell the property out there. She was able to move. Her and the kids moved away. I found some different comments on different threads I found. And some of these comments on these threads, one guy said that Hansen's ex-wife, that when she moved, she was apparently a music teacher and she taught music at a school. And he said he was taught music by her from the time he was in elementary school to when he graduated high school.
Isn't that crazy?
And said that she was an amazing woman, he said. I also saw something that she had went to Russia at some point in time and was teaching music in Russia. I don't know. I don't have any, concrete. Yeah, she was in Russia, but I saw that one. I also have a quote from in one of these comments. Somebody in there said that this is referring to Hansen's daughter. He said, I was roommates with the daughter in the late 80s and early 90s in Arkansas. She was, in fact, deeply affected and even then wanted privacy. She had her dad stutter and was self-conscious about it, even though she was spectacularly gorgeous. People, please leave her alone. She's a dear, sweet human whose dad was a monster. I've lost touch with her over the years, but I'm certain that she does not want to be found still.
Damn.
That was one comment. The I have one more comment to read, and that's all I pretty much have on this for the time being. But I found this one interesting also. So the this comment was published by Survivor was the name. And here's what she wrote. I am absolutely positive that the man who kidnapped me was Robert Hansen. It was during the Thanksgiving holidays in the early 1980s in Anchorage, Alaska. A girlfriend whom I've worked with at the oil companies. We had been to a dinner at another coworker's home. On the way back from dinner, we stopped at the Pines Club. We were at our table talking when out of nowhere, this creepy guy comes over to our table. He was kind of small, thin guy. He wore glasses. The tops of the glasses, the rims were dark plastic with metal wire on the bottom. He had a smoker's face that looked kind of gray parchment with ruts and mousy gray hair. He was nervous. He was not the kind of guy that you would ever notice. He pretty much blended in with the woodwork, you would say. He was not attractive. He told me that he was from California and wanted to take photos of me for modeling. I told him I had a very good career and I was not interested in modeling. After he left our table, we joked about his modeling line being the oldest line in the book. On my way home, I never noticed anyone following me. However, I was getting out of the car and a big white car with a dark top pulled up. The driver jumped out. He grabbed me, threw me into the front passenger side of his car, and then peeled out. We were heading south on Seaward Highway. I was absolutely terrified. I knew that once we were past the street lights, he was going to kill me. I was frantically looking for the APD cars or state troopers, but there wasn't any anywhere. I was screaming and hitting the kidnapper, fighting for my life. He was swearing at me and trying to drive while I was fighting him. I don't know how I did it, but I barreled myself out of the car. I ran between buildings and trees, trying to stay in the darkness and staying off of the roads and sidewalks so that he could not see me and kill me. I must have run about 5 miles by the time I got home. I was crawling on my hands and knees in the snow, in the cold snow and ice. I've never been so terrified in my life. I did not report this to the police because I didn't think that they would even believe me. After all, they didn't even believe the girl who was running down the street in handcuffs and had been chained up in Hansen's house for days. And she even identified Robert Hansen. Robert Hansen not only kidnapped and killed dancers and hookers, but Robert Hansen kidnapped respectable career women as well. And I lived to tell about it, even if it took 40 years. Since Robert Hansen kidnapped and killed mainly strippers and hookers, there was a certain very degrading stigma to being kidnapped by Hansen. Besides being absolutely terrified for my life, it is hard to put into words even 40 years later. I remember waking up the next morning and still being absolutely terrified, and I was so afraid that he was going to come find me and kill me. As I said, I didn't report it because I didn't think anyone would believe me. And I didn't know who he was until I saw his pictures after he had been arrested and charged with the murders of many women. So
Huh.
don't know if it's true story or what, but it
It's
checks
interesting.
out. It checks out. I mean,
Yeah,
it's the
100%.
same everything that the places and all.
That's crazy, man. That's awesome.
Well, that's all I have for the story of Robert Hansen, the butcher baker.
The Butcher Baker.
Yep.
You know, there's also one thing that I'd like to end with. You know, I'm an avid hunter myself. I love hunting. Just because you're a great hunter, it does not mean that you're a great person. As we've known from Robert Hansen, he was an excellent, outstanding marksman, outstanding hunter, outdoorsman, all the above. But he was just a horrible, despicable human being.
Yes, he was. Well, I enjoyed tonight's conversation.
I did as well, buddy.
And if anybody has a particular murdery subject that they would like to comment, email us or whatever, throw our way, feel free to.
Doesn't have to be a serial killer. It can be just as one particular murder.
We would love to see what y'all have, look into it, and hopefully we can cover it.
Thank you for listening to Strange Embers, where we recorded this in the dark, but we didn't leave you in the dark.
Good night, everyone.